Hello there, this is Jay Frost, and welcome to Frontlines of Social Good, where we bring you the latest news and insights from the world of philanthropy, fundraising, and social impact. Today's episode is going to be packed with major philanthropic moves, shifting funding priorities, and conversations about the future of fundraising and giving in the age of AI, as well as a conversation on leadership in your office and beyond. First, we're going to cover some of the biggest gifts shaping healthcare and education, examine the fallout from the Chan-Zuckerberg initiative's major shift away from DEIA and social advocacy funding, and explore what this means for the future of philanthropy. Then we'll sit down with Anne Murphy, founder of She Leads AI, to discuss women donors, AI, and how nonprofits must evolve to engage the next generation of philanthropists. And finally, we'll talk with Bobby Dawson, VP of IT and Security at DonorSearch, and author of Leadership Life, Breaking Through the Individual Contributor Ceiling, to discuss what it really takes to move from individual contributor to management in today's rapidly changing workplace. So let's get started. First of all, we begin with a few of the largest philanthropic gifts shaping healthcare, research, and education. The Green Climate Fund. You may have heard of it, maybe not, but you will know about it today. They recently approved $686 million in financing for 11 climate projects spanning 42 countries. These initiatives are expected to mobilize approximately $1.5 billion in total funding, directly benefiting 115 million people and aiming to mitigate over 45 million metric tons of CO2 emissions. Notably, the approved projects so far include first-time investments in Serbia, focusing on enhancing forest resilience, and in Togo, aimed at strengthening the climate resilience of vulnerable communities. In addition to these financial commitments, the GCF board decided to establish regional offices to enhance accessibility and increase the impact of projects in developing countries. This move is intended to bring the GCF closer to the communities it serves. Back here in the US, Trinity Health Oakland has received a record-breaking $30 million donation to enhance its emergency services. The gift will fund expansion and modernization of its emergency department, improving capacity and critical care responses for the community. Roper St. Francis Healthcare has secured a $25 million donation, the largest in its history. This will establish the Roper St. Francis Foundation, focusing on patient care, capital projects, and community health initiatives, including a new hospital in Berkeley County. A generous $11 million gift from the Clemens Family Foundation will fund cutting-edge cancer research at the University of California, Irvine. The investment is expected to accelerate innovative treatments for multiple forms of cancer. Back on the other side of the country, a $10 million donation will launch the Center for Integrative Medicine, blending conventional and complementary therapies to improve patient outcomes at the Ohio State University Wexner Medical Center. And across the pond, or actually a much bigger pond than that, the University of Melbourne and Melbourne Business School have established the Bastis Academy for Health Leadership, thanks to a $7.5 million gift, Australian dollars, of course. The Academy will focus on developing leadership skills among healthcare professionals, fostering innovation, and improving health system performance. This initiative aims to equip leaders with the tools necessary to navigate complex healthcare challenges and drive positive change. And a note here for our producer, one he'll particularly appreciate, Henderson Hospital in Nevada has received a substantial donation from Panda Express co-founders. Their generous contribution will support the hospital's expansion projects, including the addition of new patient rooms and advanced medical technology. This investment aims to enhance healthcare services for the rapidly growing Henderson community. Hospital officials expressed gratitude for the philanthropy, noting that the donation will significantly impact patient care and accessibility. Now in fundraising news. As of February 25th, Cancer Research UK's More Research, Less Cancer campaign has successfully raised over £200 million, surpassing the halfway mark of its £400 million goal within just a year of its launch. This achievement underscores the campaign's significant progress in mobilizing resources to advance cancer research and treatment in the UK. Back here in the States, Morehouse College has raised $322 million toward its $500 million capital campaign goal, supporting scholarships, faculty recruitment, and research initiatives aimed at advancing leadership development. And a campaign I'm sure you've heard about because of its annual progress in running special events to raise funds for childhood cancer. Penn State's Thon, the world's largest student-run philanthropy, has raised a record-breaking $17.7 million this year. The annual dance marathon, which involves thousands of students, surpassed previous fundraising totals, demonstrating the community's unwavering support to battling pediatric cancer. Proceeds will benefit 4Diamonds at Penn State Health Children's Hospital, assisting families and funding critical research. Now, the big story of the day, and one that leads us in our conversation with our first guest, is about the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. And if you haven't heard about this, perhaps it's because, well, either the focus for your shop hasn't been on Mark Zuckerberg, or perhaps because the initiative itself is unlike many of the charities and foundations with which we have our usual interactions. But it's involving one of the biggest shakeups in philanthropy so far this year. And it's one that speaks to what's been happening in terms of government influence in discussions of DEI. On February 25th, the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative announced that it's eliminating its diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility team and ending fundraising for social advocacy efforts, including grants for immigration reform and other progressive causes. This move, confirmed by their COO just this last week, is being framed as an adjustment to the changing legal and regulatory environment. But just last month, the staff assured the public that it was committed to diversity efforts. So this is quite a dramatic reversal. The implications for philanthropy are massive. There's a lot of money there, not only from the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative itself, but for others in the corporate sector who are investing in these causes. And the funder is increasingly cautious about social advocacy, and nonprofits who are relying on these grants will need to find new funding strategies. And that, of course, brings us to our next guest, Anne Murphy. And now, for those who don't know Anne, I know we'll have a chance to introduce her right now, but I want to make sure that you know something about her work. She is the founder of She Leads AI, guiding organizations in using AI to future-proof fundraising and philanthropy. Anne, thanks so much for being here today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be here. Jay, thank you for this series overall, and thank you for introducing these important topics today.
Oh, it's a pleasure. And it's great to have you back and to be able to talk with you about something substantial like this. And if people don't know about your work, do you mind giving us a thumbnail sketch and also about the founding of She Leads AI?
Yeah. So I have spent my life as a fundraiser. The first 27 years of my career, after like making pizzas and mowing lawns and stuff like that, I spent in higher education and nonprofit fundraising. And a couple years ago, I decided to go out on my own so I could work with a lot of different organizations versus working in one, research, one institution, primarily representing STEM fields for 27 years. So we launched our consultancy, which at the time was very, standard fundraising, consulting, and coaching and education. And then, AI, generative AI hit the scene in the way that it has, and that is the beginning of the evolution to She Leads AI. I'll quickly just share what She Leads AI is. We are an organization that unites accomplished women to advance AI for global prosperity. We do this in a number of ways. The first is we have an academy. So we have educational offerings, everything from like generative AI 101 or 110 to leadership boot camps in AI to intensive retreats on demand, et cetera. So we offer education. We have a membership community where we all learn from one another. We do member jams. We're just teaching as we're going, teach and learn, teach and learn. And then we have an AI consultancy. So a number of us work with nonprofits and small, medium-sized businesses to integrate AI on an enterprise-wide basis. So She Leads AI is a brand, and we have 3 core groups under it, and participate in public advocacy and policy creation as well.
Is this an outgrowth of something you did a little bit earlier where you had a lot of people setting up, I know, these GPTs within the chat GPT world?
So, yes, it's interesting because the confluence of my work as a fundraiser in the philanthropic sector and AI has come together so beautifully, in part because AI is so confrontational to all of our self-identity and our well-being, our economy, our environment, all the things that we take care of in the nonprofit sector bumps up against the, evolution of AI. And so these two things have come together in a couple of different ways. One was the event that you mentioned last in 2023, where we hosted like a custom GPT hackathon. And we had over 1,000 people come in and learn how to make custom GPTs for nonprofits they love. And then the next year we thought, well, okay, this is kind of becoming an annual event because we did it once. So that means annual. And we did another event. It was 23 hours of AI sessions given by AI practitioners like me. We had 3,400 people register, 2,400 people show up, 546 people in every session. So we're getting to the point where we're starting to see these tipping points, people coming into the AI world. And my goal, kind of straddling the AI world and the nonprofit sector, is how do we bring these two things together so that the work that we do is better and serves our, particularly with social justice initiatives, serves our community best.
And why women?
It's such a good question. There are a couple of things. One I wanted to point out, just to level set, is that I never set out to do anything that was for women. It just evolved that way. What we saw in our larger group settings about AI, because we were doing weekly events for a couple hours every weekend, was, there'd be 70 or 80 people there, really, wonderful conversation. But when it came time to leave or hit the red button on Zoom, the women would hang around. And then it felt like the real conversation started. And then people started saying, we really need a regular space for us to get together, right? We've already done the, women in tech thing where we're the only woman in the room. Like, we need space where we can hang around each other. We could talk about some of these existential issues, talk about our elder care, talk about our children, our grandchildren, how this impacts our own careers, our back to work strategies, et cetera. And it just happened. I was offering all these courses, I was doing free trainings. I trained 4,000 people in just general how to use AI. And all of a sudden, 95% of the people who came to my sessions were women. I never said it wasn't for everybody. It's just, I think that there's an interest in our ability to one of our go-to leadership styles is empathy. And what is so important right now is that we are empathetic to everyone around us, from the ones who are the AI accelerators to the ones who are the AI, doubters. And that our ability to bring that empathy into the leadership skill set, I think, is really just highly sought after right now.
I'm thinking about some of the criticisms of AI, and I don't mean here about it's going to make us all lose our jobs, although
Right.
that's something else we could discuss because of feminization of philanthropy and
Yep.
fundraising. But I'm thinking about the criticisms that have to do with who is behind the creation of AI, how these algorithms are developed, whether or not there's bias that's inherent in the development of these tools, and when the women that you've been working with, many of them now, thousands of them, are interacting with these tools, are they finding that they have to view that relationship with technology differently? And
Mhm.
are they able then to leverage it in different ways, more effective ways than if they were just, I don't know, thinking about it the same old way we tend to think about fundraising? Here are the 6 ways to do something.
I think AI gives us the opportunity to break what's already broken. So when somebody who's on the call right now is, working with ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude whatever their favorite large language model is, they're going to get results that are biased, that they will know about because they are the kind of people who look for bias in things, right? Most of people in our community, if they put in a prompt, for send me an image of a CEO and it's a guy, they're going to think, well, I didn't say say that he should look like a guy, but it sent me a guy. So what's up with my prompt? What do I need to say differently? Or that it sends back a white person, or that the woman is always going to be young and skinny, often white. I think that right now we have the opportunity to be part of the conversations about who is building the models and what they're being trained on. But as a user, I think our industry is actually several steps ahead because we're going to look for those kind of biases to not be producing harmful content, harmful results. But yeah, I mean, it's unfortunately or unfortunately, it's trained on, 40 years of what humanity put onto the internet. And there's a lot of not nice things on the internet.
Right. And some of it, it might seem so benign on the surface that we don't realize that it can have a greater impact. And what you just mentioned, even for this series a few months ago, I used it was ChatGPT to generate a couple of images for a session where I specifically asked for a woman to be pictured, and it
Yep.
was talking about the difference between being frazzled and the out of control environment. It was something to do with the session with getting organized, I guess, and then generate an image of where that life was under control, and it generated a young thin woman, to your point earlier, and in the image where things were out of control, the paper was all over the place and she was wearing flats. But when the image generated with the things under control, she was suddenly wearing heels.
Yeah.
And I certainly didn't ask for footwear as a choice in my prompt.
Right.
So
Yeah.
there is a lot of bias, I guess, inherent in these things. So when you're working with so many people now who have been participating in all of this, especially now with She Leads AI, what are some of the guidelines maybe that you're able to provide, or you and your colleagues are able to provide other women in the sector for using AI in ways that are truly not just beneficial in a practical sense, like getting the job done faster, but also in a way that elevates them?
It's a good question. Let me think for 1 second. I'm gonna share an unpopular opinion on this. But one of the ways that we improve the output of these large language models down the road is by putting more data out into the system that is unbiased, that it will be trained on. There's a lot of conversation about how critical it is, of course, to protect some of our data because it's highly confidential and very personal, right? That's not the data that I'm talking about, right? We are, of course, going to be very, very careful with all of our confidential data. But if you are making images of, say you're asking for an image of women at a coffee shop talking about their strategic planning retreat. And what you can do is prompt that so that you indicate what the women should look like, right? Be very, very specific. And then that image, or say, describe the image, ask it to put words to it, and then make the image, let that go out into the training data so that your less biased stuff goes out there into the world. So I consider it to be giving back by, I don't have everything in my ecosystem set as confidential automatically. My content goes out into the world to help train the next rounds of training data. So again, not very many people are going to say that. They're going to say, no matter what you do, make sure everything is confidential. But I'm a fundraiser. There are only so many different ways to say thank you or write a briefing without confidential information or write an article about the impact of a gift. It's okay if it goes out into the world and somebody else, turns into training data for the next model.
That brings up another question, which is, what are some of the other controversies that you're running into? If one of them is, be careful about how you're training this thing because we can't control it. What are the other things that are really the guidance that you're providing?
Um, I think that there's a lot of controversy over who is making the decisions with regard to AI guardrails, AI legislation. So a couple of months ago, I went to meet with some legislators at our state capitol in Oregon. And the reason that I was in the room with a handful of other small business owners was that our legislators they don't use AI, and they're going off of the headlines, and they're saying, hey, we know we are not the boots on the ground. Like, we need you all to tell us, how are you using it? If we say A, what does it mean for small Black-owned businesses, right? If we say B, what does it mean for all of the women who are coming back into the workforce after leaving due to COVID, right? So I think there's an ongoing concern over who is making those decisions. Of course, and then we have some of our, better known leaders. JD Vance was commenting about how he's not here to talk about AI safety, right? So who's making these judgment calls, and who that's going to impact is going to continue to be a hot topic for a while. Yeah, that's a big
I,
one.
Fundraising.ai has been, I guess,
Hmm.
parallel with what you've been developing here,
Yep.
and you're a participant in that.
Yep. Yep.
Um, are they tracking against these issues as well? Are they able to address them in a way that's then proliferating across the sector?
Yeah. So I should say that we work across industries now in very similar use cases. It's amazing. Humans are humans, no matter what industry, and how we're interacting with AI is very similar from industry to industry. But what I have found is that the framework for responsible AI in fundraising is, give or take, 20 to 30%, really like a very, very good model for other people to use. I think what's important for all of us to really embrace is that downloading or even just riffing off of an existing framework is not the same thing as compliance, right? That's downloading it and saying you now have a policy that's like that check mark compliance. It's not real. So what you need to do is have conversations inside your organization about these frameworks and how they bump up against your values, your constituents, your other stakeholders, et cetera. So taking something like framework for responsible AI, taking that and using that as a discussion guide would be a recommendation for folks who are wondering, how are we doing with AI? Are we doing anything that we're going to regret down the road?
Yeah, yeah. I do want to pivot just a little bit to discussion of philanthropy, if
Yeah.
I may.
Yes,
So
please.
one of the other things that we know in this world is that women are the the major force behind philanthropy. They arguably always have been, but clearly
Mhm.
today there is no denying it in terms of the statistics, where the money is, where the money is growing, who's making the decisions. Um,
Yeah.
but there's still at least an anecdotal discussion that we are focusing on men. So
Mhm.
first, I should check and check myself. And is that something you're hearing as well? And in these discussions, especially with women in this field, are you finding that to be the case? And is there a way to kind of reorient or refocus some of our attention to women, since they appear to be where the money is,
Yeah.
and also making all the decisions?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's very easy to say, like, blanket level, net, blended average, right? We tend to program more towards men in the nonprofit sector. Definitely my personal experience is skewed toward that, in part because I've worked in higher education, most of my career, and I've worked in STEM fields. And so in my case, I have probably a higher concentration of very male-driven kind of business operations, but I see this in the nonprofits that I consult with as well, where it's clear we what got here first, right? That thing about what got us here isn't going to get you there. What got us here is being really prepared to have conversations with men about the philanthropy of their family. And it's just based on good old stereotypes, right? That, men make the money, men spend the money, men are decision makers. And we're ultimately going to need to be persuading them or inspiring them. Basic human nature, right? Nobody set out for this to be this way. But then those business operations, those systems, those ways of being in our industry became codified, right? So now this is how we give. This is why we have, a bias in higher ed toward loyalty-based giving. It's because that is how guys are more likely to give. They are more likely to be loyalty donors than passion or, problem solving or a set of particular causes that they want to solve or issues that they want to solve. And so we started teaching people that at conferences, right? This is how we do it. And so then we have our newbie fundraisers coming into the world say, okay, this is, you go meet with somebody at their office, right? We're set up to go meet with people in their offices. We're set up to, um, use certain language to orchestrate the sales cycle in a way that works for faster decision makers, which tend to be guys. So those things now need to be called back into question.
I hate to ask it, but I have to ask the crystal ball question. So you're working with a lot of people now. You're thinking about these issues all the time. You're also seeing the practical challenges, not only of fundraising in general, but women in fundraising and philanthropy specifically.
Mm-hmm.
And now with the adoption of AI, this kind of effort to figure out how to make it all work together and how to merely make it work, especially for
Mm-hmm.
all the women who are arguably the majority in fundraising and in
Mm-hmm.
philanthropy as well. So as you look ahead, where do you think AI could be helping to reshape philanthropy and fundraising
Mm-hmm.
for women?
I'll give a couple of examples that are it's on a continuum, right? I mean, you could start with, it's going to be helpful because we can create a persona that is a female philanthropist, and we can say to that persona, what would you change about this messaging in this event invitation if Joanne were reviewing it, right? So that's something basic, right? It's like, you don't have to have your whole entire women's giving circle on a Zoom call to test your messaging anymore, right? You're going to do that all in the comfort of your own at your own desk. So that's like on one side. But on the other end of the spectrum, you could look at things like, it's very common right now to send development officers to somebody's house still. And that fundraiser may or may not be comfortable going into somebody's house. And the donor may or may not be comfortable inviting the fundraiser to their house anymore. So then we layer that with the donors will mostly be women and the fundraisers are mostly women. It means that that the group, in my opinion, my take is the group of people who are going to adopt AI avatars as their like fundraising conduit will be women donors and women fundraisers. It is from a risk management perspective. I put everything else aside. It doesn't matter how everybody feels about fundraising through avatars. And the reason why I say it doesn't matter, I'm not trying to be mean mom, is it doesn't matter because it's happening, just like it is in all other aspects of our world. the fast adopters there will be women because it's safer. So from a risk management perspective, you're not inviting a stranger into your home. From you're the CEO of a nonprofit, you're not sending young women out to somebody's house in the middle of nowhere anymore. It just, so think about examples like that of just how, due to just like human nature, how things in our industry are going to change because of the existence of AI and just where the trends are and the opportunities that we have. It's very likely that in the middle there, it will just become standard that we are pivoting, we are learning, we are rethinking what we do with women by using AI tools to teach us, because we don't have time for behemoth conferences that cost $2,500 just to get in the door, to adapt their programming to teach us how to fundraise from women. This has to happen on a large scale. And I think that we needed to be working on this yesterday, but so a wholesale shift in skills and culture in our industry is hard to look at holistically. I think individual fundraisers can, at this point in time, take it upon themselves to use AI to learn how to do this.
Thank you, Anne, for all of this. If people want to learn more about She Leads AI and get involved, how can they do that?
So where there we go. So
yes.
sheleadsai.ai, it's like brand new, like today it's mostly working. So that's our website. So go check it out. It's beautiful.
Which is at She Leads AI. And is it
.ai?
.ai?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
sheleadsai.ai, and then the thing that, yes, Jack, it's redirecting to .net, but it's sheleadsai.ai. And then the QR code there is to connect with me on LinkedIn. You can also just put hashtag Anne Murphy Philanthropy and I'll show up. But I basically talk about AI and philanthropy pretty much every day. I talk a lot about women in AI, talk a lot about women in philanthropy, and the intersection of those was really fun to talk with you about today, Jay. Appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Anne. Really do appreciate you and everything you're doing here.
Thank you.
Do check this out. I know you'll appreciate being a part of it. It's you didn't start it with women in mind, but obviously women have really understood the value in the same way they had with philanthropy and with fundraising, and that makes perfect sense.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much.
Now we're going to turn to another discussion of leadership, specifically how professionals can move from individual contributor status to management. And if you want to think about that for a moment, if those terms aren't familiar to you, you're going to learn a lot more about it now, because chances are many of you listening and watching are in the former category and not in the latter. And so to find out more about that journey and how to take it, we have Bobby Dawson, the Vice President of IT and Security at DonorSearch, which is kind of the brain within the company, providing all this incredible data and services for the nonprofit sector. He's also the author of a new book, Leadership Life, Breaking Through the Individual Contributor Ceiling. So with that, Bobby, thank you so much for making time to be here and talk today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Jay. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you. And I don't think a lot of people who've been participating in the Mastermind series have seen you before, but they have, for those who know DonorSearch, they do in a sense know you already. So maybe first, could you just tell people what you do on the inside of DonorSearch?
Absolutely. So yeah, I've been at DonorSearch for 7 or 8 years now. I'm the VP of IT and Security. So I run all of our internal and external IT operations, in charge of the product and everything you see and plenty of you interact with on a day-to-day basis.
Which is pretty complicated stuff, actually. You're talking about lots of data points and lots of security to protect those, as well as all the customers' data.
Yep, absolutely. That's what they tell me. They tell me it's it's pretty complex.
Well, you look pretty relaxed about it, so maybe that tells us something right there. And that is, management is not just a matter of telling people what to do, but it's finding a way to get the culture to move with you and to be successful. But I know we'll get there. First, can you just tell us about these definitions? So individual contributor versus management. I shouldn't say versus, but the difference between them. Can you define those a bit for us, and then about that journey? Talk about that journey.
Sure. Yeah. So I would say you definitely can say versus. There's a big difference between the two sides of that. And so an individual contributor is somebody that is doing that day-to-day work that is, not necessarily in charge of anyone. I don't want to say below them, but in charge of any other individuals. And then that move to management is more looking at the strategy and giving people direction, helping people grow. So I would say the difference between the two is a pretty clear delineation. Obviously, there's plenty of roles that have overlap in there, but the further you move into that management, the more clear that line really becomes.
And this journey is one you've taken yourself.
This journey has been my entire career. So I've followed this journey, and I feel like most moves to management follow this very similar journey. I don't have the research to back this, but it's probably the most common path to go into management. You start as this individual contributor that is high performing. You do everything better than everyone else, and the clear logical path is that you are promoted into management. And a lot of that skill set between the two does not necessarily align. So just to make that jump is almost, you're almost starting over. And the more quickly you can realize that, the better off you'll be.
Why are they out of alignment? What's the disconnect?
So I think the big disconnect is there. I mean, there's a couple of facets to that, and a lot of that is what my book focuses on. So one, some smaller facets of it would be the communication. So communication is obviously a big part of leadership, a big part of being a manager, and the way that you communicate as an individual contributor, you're talking to your peers and your direct management, and every once in a while, maybe a client. But it's very one-dimensional, maybe two-dimensional communication that you're doing. As you move into management, and the further you move into the management, the more your role is about being a translator. So you are now trying to translate from I always use obviously IT references, but from maybe a developer standpoint to the strategy that the executives are looking for. They don't want to know the details about how you're going to do something. They want to know why you're doing something and how it's going to help the business. Developers don't. It's not that they don't care about how it's going to help the business, but they want to know how to do it. So you are the translator between all these different facets, whether it be an investor or other executives, peers, or even other individual contributors under those managers.
Translation is tough for so many reasons. One of them is that you're not just translating the facts of the matter, but the kind of the intention, right? I mean, what do people really mean? And I suppose it's additionally difficult when you've got different verticals within any kind of organization. Nonprofits have this as well as businesses. Can you speak to that a little bit? How, if you're trying to translate the needs of, let's say, the CEO or board member or somebody who runs a different division, but they talk differently, how do you make that stuff work?
So it's actually it's probably the most beneficial means that your path would be from individual contributor to these manager levels. Because if you can keep in mind what it took at each level that you reached to make those conversations, then it becomes much easier to be fluent in the different, I almost want to say dialects that you have to speak in. So if you've been at all these roles and made your way up the food chain, if you will, you know how to speak at each one of these levels. So that makes making that translation process of what maybe your CEO is looking for versus what a junior developer is looking to hear much easier to do.
Now, I know I just jumped right into you being at DonorSearch and then you wrote this book, but we didn't really take a moment to look at your own journey. So how can you tell us a little bit about that, but also how that informs your thinking on this? Because you haven't been just in one place or doing one thing.
Right. I've done many things. So my wife loves and hates the jack of all trades, but whenever I find a new task or new thing that excites me, I look for a way to be able to share that with others in one way or another. Usually it ends up with me starting a business. So I've gone anywhere from I owned a wedding DJ company for a dozen years. I ran a home remodeling business for 3 or 4 years. And then obviously I've been at DonorSearch working my way from a developer to my now VP of IT position. And then I also have a IT consulting business outside of that. So it's, I've, I try to find a way to share any skill that excites me with others, and a lot of that works out well because I'm able to find relations between one business to another that may not seemingly make sense. So the way an example would be when I was doing the home remodeling business, you're spending a lot of time talking to clients, and the way that you talk to these clients and communicates how long their bathroom renovation is going to take, or the budget for the overall renovation and the possible issues that could come up directly relates to any of the issues that you might have in developing a new product. So there's, if you look for the relationships between things that may seemingly not or should not relate, then it makes it very easy to be able to explore different and new ideas. So that is how I've really followed my career path.
And it sounds kind of opportunistic in a positive way. Here's an idea or maybe a challenge or a problem to solve, and then you went and after solving it, whether that's providing the music for a wedding, which by the way is one of the biggest problems that anybody needs to solve for a happy life. But that's definitely true for home renovations, and I know it's true in the work that you do now. But that also seems to suggest that moving from job to job has benefits. There are lots of arguments about this in the field, whether or not kind of hopping around is beneficial to a person's career, but maybe more than just a career, if it's helpful in individual jobs that people take on. What are your thoughts on
that? So this is, it's a very interesting question, because I do have I think some of my opinions on this both completely are negated by the fact that I've done all these different businesses. But in general, I know, and all my Instagram reels are management based or employment based and things like that. So I see all the things that say, changing your job every 2 years. You'll net 10 or 20% more overall income. And, I don't know the research behind it. It may very well be true, but the problem I always have with that, especially early in your career, giving that advice to somebody very early in their career, is you're sacrificing long-term personal growth for short-term monetary gains. So by not sticking with a company, especially one that has the right culture fit for you and just has a mission that you really believe in, and instead looking for that 10% pay bump instead, that keeps you from being able to prove that you can learn that institutional knowledge that you have to start over every single time that you're joining a new business. You're starting from square one, learning everything about a new business, when you could really be growing yourself vertically within a business, learning all the facets of that business, and learning how to be a good manager within that role. I would say it's probably a lot harder to get from that individual contributor mindset to a manager space without finding a way to grow that within the same company.
Yeah, that's really interesting also for all the folks who are in the impact sector, nonprofits. We talk about this with Major Gifts a lot, that people will jump from job to job. It's 18 to 24 months and people are on to the next thing, maybe because the opportunity is there, maybe because they haven't been successful. There are all these different theories, but definitely one factor is you might be able to earn more as you move, because you start with you're not going to start by earning less in the next position than you earned in your last position. So that seems to incentivize people to jump around. But your point is then, you aren't necessarily investing in your long-term growth, which is pretty fascinating. Let's flip that around. How can organizations then incentivize people to stick around if it's not always about the money? How can we encourage people to stick with it so they end up rising to management and leadership?
Yeah, I think there's a few real paths that organizations can follow for that. And I think it really depends on the individual. One of the things I talk about in my book a lot is all these levels of management. You've now moved into your product being people. So you need to now understand people and what motivates people, what demotivates people. Mm-hmm. So some people are only motivated by money. That is all they're motivated for. But people are getting that 10% to 20% pay bump in their job moves because you're going to. That's just how inflation works. You're going to pay somebody else new that you're bringing in more money than you were paying somebody in that previous position, and it's a hard realization, and it kind of negates a lot of where culture was before now. But now everything is so out there and open. There's information everywhere. Everyone shares everything about every facet of their life. So there's no real gatekeeping anymore. So just the fact that you have to know if it's somebody that's completely motivated by money to offer what you believe that they're worth, or what you would pay somebody in that same position if you had to bring somebody new in. At the same token, a lot of people are motivated by individual goals or growth or just acknowledgement. So just learning what motivates each person on your team is, I think it's really the true key to not having a huge turnover. And that's a very common, I know in the philanthropy space, it's a huge issue. And then obviously in tech. There's a huge issue of jumping jobs every 1 or 2 years. And we have a very low turnover rate here at DonorSearch in our tech department. I think a lot of it has to do with our culture and just the way that we individually treat each one of our employees.
In fact, one of the things I know that's happened at DonorSearch, which happened in many nonprofits, but now there's, especially in corporations, this is starting to reverse, is asking people to come back to the office. And I know this isn't about your book, but I did want to ask you about that because it is a part of culture, about the demands we make on employees or the encouragements we provide to them. And it's not always about money, as we know in the nonprofit sector. So it's about other things. So when it comes to this kind of returning to work piece, how important has that been at a place like DonorSearch, or how are you hearing about that issue from all the other colleagues within the sector?
You're crystal balling me here, because when and if I go to write a second book, it will 100% be about remote positions. It is by and large one of the most important things to me. I don't know where to start with you on this, because as a company, our true growth started both from a tech standpoint, from a company standpoint, and just from a culture standpoint, happened when COVID hit and we all went remote. We are fortunate enough to have a strong CEO and COO that are acknowledging of the fact that this remote lifestyle is keeping people happy. It is keeping our employees happy. It's keeping everyone engaged, and we're not having a loss of productivity from this. So remote work it's insanely important to me. I'll never not work remotely again.
Well, this is something you can save it for your book. We'll embargo this, so you can still write about it. No, I'm sure that's going to be important for especially the folks in the nonprofit sector to hear, because they're trying to figure this out too. And I know it's happened right now. It's happening with people who are in the government, many of whom interact with us in the nonprofit sector. So it's great to hear that if it can work in tech, and since everything now is increasingly informed by tech, it can work for nonprofits too. Do you have some big key learnings in this book that would whet people's appetites to go and grab this? I mean, like I think you have a 5 no's exercise, for example, leadership commandments. Anything maybe you'd like to leave people with to encourage them, not just to potentially read the book, which is great, but also to talk about it with their colleagues, because some of the things you've been sharing are things we need to discuss together. Is that a fair assessment?
Definitely. Absolutely. Oh yeah. Only because you said 5 no's first, I am happy to talk about that, because so when I went to write this book, I wanted to, there's nothing if not a lack of, there's nothing but information available these days. There's no reason to not know something about anything, because the information is out there. You can find it. There's thousands of books on leadership. There's YouTube videos. You can scroll TikTok for hours if you want, but there's endless sources for this information. I went out with the goal of consolidating some of that information along with my personal experience. So one of the exercises that I put in the book that is it's probably my favorite exercise, and for somebody that is sometimes an introvert, one of the hardest exercises and things to overcome. And it was called the 5 no's exercise. I don't know who to credit with the exercise. I'm sure it came up in an Instagram reel or something, but I have adopted this and I love this more than any strategy in the entire book. And what it is every single day, you find a way to ask 5 questions that you think the answer could be no. So it doesn't have to be corporate related. You can request a free coffee at the coffee shop, or ask for a hotel upgrade on your room. Ask to join a pickup basketball game, or request an intro with somebody in your network that maybe could further your career or further your personal growth. I mean, this is the goal. The goal is to get used to requesting what you need, or sometimes even just what you want, and being comfortable with being told no. The one group that really excels at this would be somebody moving from a sales individual contributor mindset into that manager role, where, in sales, you're going to be, if you're good, you're used to being told no. And not only that, you know how to overcome it. So for somebody that does not inherently have this in them, it is insanely efficient in helping you with a giant skill set that you would need for a managerial role.
Maybe we'll end with that one, because that's something that everybody here can chew on and use. And we could probably talk maybe another time about how to say no, which is the kind of reverse of that, which is often a problem for some people. But getting people to just ask for things that they might hear no to, that's something that everybody in fundraising philanthropy had better be able to do. So thank you for the words of wisdom. Thank you for sharing all this, Bobby, and for everything you do there. If people want to learn more about your book, get a copy of it, how best to do that?
Sure. So the book is on Amazon. I believe that Jack posted the link in the chat.
Okay.
Otherwise, obviously, you can just search for it on Amazon, or you can go to bobbydawson.com. And I believe I have a pop-up right on there. And you'll also see all my various businesses. So,
okay. But don't try to book him for a wedding, because he's too busy for that these days. Thank you so much, Bobby, for all of this. Really do appreciate it.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
It's great to have you. So, folks, now we have some stuff coming up soon, including this Thursday, Be Prepared for Millennial Donors, with Jennifer Lehman, CEO of Mission Advancement, and Sarah Landman, Executive Vice President of Philanthropy Services at Newsbank. It's kind of a combo session for CFRA credit. So if you're a fundraiser and you're listening to this, join us. Are you ready for the $30 to $70 trillion wealth transfer to millennials? That's how much we're talking about. Based upon real-life interviews conducted by Sarah Landman with high net worth millennial donors, she's found out what works and what fails. She, together with Jennifer Lehman, who's going to be leading the session on Thursday, will be able to fill you in on all of that, plus provide their own personal experiences in working with millennial donors. And once again, that's for CFRE credit in our How to Raise series, which airs every Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern. Also on the podcast, in addition to recent episodes with Jim Langley, a voice many of us admire, which is available for you on both the DonorSearch YouTube channel, as well as all the major podcasting platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, you name it. We have an episode with Sarah Lomelin, who is the head of Philanthropy Together. Marvelous discussion with her about her life. And coming this Friday, James Meisner, founder of the Kipos Group, who takes us on his international journey. Really fascinating as well. Check all that out wherever you like to listen. And then next Tuesday, in Frontlines of Social Good, once again, we have Erica Wasdorp, author of Monthly Giving Made Easy, among the rest of what we have on the show. And we're going to ask you for a special favor on that. If you'd like to see more of our On the Road series, it's going to rely upon you. So if you have a video from your organization that you'd like featured here, or you know of another organization that you'd like us to feature, please let us know. You can write to me at that's J-A-Y, at DonorSearch.net, or you can find me on LinkedIn. And of course, we would love to see you next time. So until then, stay engaged, stay informed, and keep making an impact. So with that, see you next time.